a minute early. Wow, I'm early. We're early for our first time. That's really exciting. Um, so we do have a few viewers here, and I'm trying to think of like how to see if I could see it in this other part of the chat. Um, and maybe EO could be even able to see that in the people who actually chat. Oh, gotta
I
make
do
sure that.
not see that.
Okay, you don't
um,
see it. Okay.
no,
I'm gonna do like a sample. Hey everyone.
I do see that there are three
Okay,
people, but it doesn't say anything
great.
besides that.
Okay. I do see it right now, so I will be reading it. Okay, so we're just gonna start. Hopefully everything's working. Steve, as soon as my husband, as soon as we start, before we started, he's like, Vanessa, he's like, just ground yourself. I was like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, that's right. Because technology, I always think it mirrors our energy.
Mm,
And so it's just like if I'm anxious, then there's the energy matches me
hmm
in that way. Um, but then I also think that especially when I do readings and so forth, psychic readings, that when I have a lot of energy coming through, they will always mess up the feed. And I was just
mm.
like, you guys, I was like, stop it, because I was like, this isn't going to work. So, okay, so I am Vanessa Wishstar, psychic medium, spirit guide, writer. I don't know, I'm a lot of things. And this is my friend EO. Hi, EO.
Hello. It's good to be here.
Childhood friend from a very long time ago. So yeah, thank you for joining me in this. What we're about to discuss. We're going to discuss anxiety today, and and I kind of found it really funny of us choosing this topic because there's so many different topics, and it's kind of like, why is anxiety on a psychic podcast?
Mm,
And to me, anxiety and a lot of normal daily things in our life, psychic podcast isn't a knowing, and psychic, to me, being psychic is really a not knowing, which is very opposite of what we normally think of intuition and so forth. So that's kind of what we're going to be talking about is anxiety and what we know and what we actually don't know, and maybe tap into more of how we feel and our body's response to that. So um, I think we should just go off. So we were just like in discussion about like what does that mean, and we were just asking each other questions of kind of like spurring conversation because Eo and I could talk for hours.
and we do.
And I know, right? And I don't know if like people would ever be interested in that. So we're going to try to keep it more concise for viewers. And I really encourage, if you see the chat, that means you're subscribed to Vanessa Wishstar, or whether it's under V Wishstar or whatever on YouTube. So if you want to chat and ask questions, feel free to interrupt us at any time. We'll obviously get to all your questions, and or just things that resonate with you. It doesn't have to necessarily be a question. So please write in there in the chat part of connecting with us, because we really would love to hear from you. That's the point of doing this live. And the way to do that is subscribe. So just hit that subscribe button and then you'll be able to type away. Okay. So I think I'm going to let you go first. And what our first question, what we were kind of doing inquiry on is like, what is anxiety to us?
Yeah.
I think that was the question.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was anxiety? Okay. So, what was anxiety to us? Society's language versus our language. And also, I would love you to talk about, from what your perspective is, and also your background's perspective, of also maybe what happens in the physical body when anxiety is activated and turned on.
Sure. Absolutely. Well, let me first start by saying that I am an artist by by trade. I am not a doctor, and I'm not a therapist.
Mhm.
I am a person who's been
Yes.
on a very long journey of kind of self exploration and healing, like we all are. So I just want to kind of get that out of the way. I am not an expert. I do not have all or maybe any of the answers, but I do know some things, and I've done some research and have talked to specialists. So yeah, I think anxiety is different for everyone. That's one thing I've kind of realized talking to a lot of people about it. And part of being on my own personal journey is reaching out to those around me who I trust to have conversations with, and asking them how anxiety presents itself in their life. And not only how it presents itself, but like ultimately, what are the triggers? Like what kind of sets it off? Because I thought at one point in my life, I was like, oh, everyone experiences it, so everyone must have the same reasons. But that's clearly just not true at all. So I think um, things I've come to realize talking to my friends and family is that it tends to be something that is deep, deep, and from probably early in life often. And for me, I can speak to my own experiences. It often had to do with a lack of some sort of resource. I think right off the bat, it's easy to kind of assume that would be financial resource. And I did grow up without very much money, so that was a big one for sure. But also, it's the resource of my own personal abilities, resource of time, um, and I realize it's like what could be coming down the line that would cause me to be in a position where I wouldn't have the resource to do what I need to survive that situation. And by survive, not the capital S, like I might die, but like keep from being embarrassed, keep
Mm.
from being, or humiliated or ostracized, or just be on the out, and or be financially just up the creek. So that was what I figured out for mine. And so to ask your question is like, how does it present in the body? I had a very good therapist who once, or more than once, told me that the body, remembers, and so it kind of keeps the receipts of what we've been through. So sometimes we're experiencing things that our minds are not even perceiving, but our bodies let us know. So all of a sudden we realize our heart rate is up. Maybe our swams or palms are sweating. We feel dizzy. Maybe there's just a nebulous sense of doom that is floating over us. And there are a million legitimate reasons to feel that. And then some of them are old, and those dangers have passed. And so we are now maybe holding on to things because all those feelings, I think, have been a way for us to kind of protect ourselves. And so sometimes we have to figure out ways of convincing ourselves that we don't need to protect ourselves in that way anymore. Um, at least that's what I found for myself. So um, that is kind of where I come from. That's kind of my experience. And talking to people different generations, those causes of those anxieties are very different. Some are shared amongst generations as well. So I think any demographic, any group you're part of, you can have those commonalities. So I don't know if that answered your question or not, but
I love that. And I love that because it to me is just it's kind of like a volleyball, setup
mm,
of being like that's exactly how I feel. And I love what you specifically said of it's not needing to protect ourselves
right.
because this is what and just also to echo what Io was saying is that this for a disclaimer on this video and all videos that you ever see, there is no medical advice being given, so please consult a doctor or a
Yeah.
medical
Yes.
practitioner, a psychologist, whatever, to get help and to really help yourself. This is just an open dialogue that we're having, that
Yeah.
we do not have the uh, background, to give any
Yeah.
type of medical advice. So heads up,
Yeah.
loud and clear about that. But I love what you said about not needing to protect ourselves because
Yeah.
that is just, I didn't, I didn't realize that
Mm,
through my own experience till I really did so much inquiry on anxiety.
yeah.
So one of the things for me is that anxiety is very much um, it like just like what Io said, it comes differently for everybody. And so I thought it was very kind of like stereotyped and oh well it's whatever you're thinking, and if you're kind of a doom and gloom person that and
Right.
it's just repetitive, and sometimes it really does show up a lot that way. But and
Right.
then I was like, I don't have anxiety, but then I'm like, oh my God, I can't do this, whatever. And
Yeah.
then I was like, oh, I just have anxiousness, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Or like panic or whatever. So there's so many different, maybe, I think if we maybe label it and then rip off the label, you know what I'm
Mm,
saying? Label it to find it and to find that, oh, where I identify, and then ripping off the label of like, oh, well, that's just sticky anyway. And it's just kind
mm,
of like, I am such a layered being.
Mhm.
And then we get to the place of exploratory. So can
Mm.
we explore anxiety instead
Yeah.
of being attacked by it or succumbed by it? So
Yeah.
for me, the anxiety's purpose, I said, to save ourselves. It's our response of mistrust. And usually we put trust in another and we
Mm.
rarely put trust in ourselves.
Yeah.
And so, and the other problem is because we don't believe that our source, that the source of who we are, to
Mhm.
me, it's a divine connectivity to all that is. But that we're like, well, who are we trusting? And it's just like, well, I am trusting or I'm not trusting them outside of me. But then it's like, I'm definitely not trusting myself. We've been subjected, I feel like, by society's belief system because, it's a quote disorder or it's something, a disease, or it's something that is wrong with us. And those are kind of inflammatory words and belief systems. And
Mhm.
so, we naturally are like, well, I'm not that. That's too vulnerable to be, and I don't want to be boxed into that. And so then we go into this big thing of like, well, I'm not anxious, but like everything we do in our life is anxiety prone.
Mm.
And so,
For sure.
as simple as something like getting on here and I'm laughing at myself while I'm trying to figure out the technology side of this. And, and Eel on the other side is like, no, I'm chill. I'm waiting here, whatever. I was like, I am so not chill, like that's just my reality. And so the way I get through that is I laugh. I find humor in it of being like,
Mhm.
okay, how can I still keep being me,
Yeah.
even though I'm having this? And so
Yeah.
I really do a lot of work, and we'll talk about that later, but work and being able to sit in it
Mm.
and find peace and love in it instead of making it go away. So for me, the other thing is anxiety. Whenever I have a client that, for those of you who missed, I'm a psychic medium by trade. Whenever I have a client and we're discussing anxiety, those are some of my favorite people
Mm.
because to me, they're like, they don't know their big secret yet. And so anxiety is, to me, a misuse of our psychic development.
Mm.
It's intel, it's intel coming in, so it's like a new language coming into your body or into your sphere, and your body is trying to interpret it and doing a darn good job of it. But our mind is like, no, beep, well, and it is not being able to connect the two. And so you're getting this education from an energy source, but it's not known by the head. And this is all we're doing is every single thing we do in life is, well, we know what to do or how to do it, or we're learning how. So it's the I know, to me, is like the big red flag,
Mm.
because in psychic awareness and so forth, you have to dismantle all of the I know. There is really no I know, which is, that's the joke of having a psychic podcast talking about I know something. And it's just like, no, this entire podcast is about what we don't know. But what we're available to digest and assimilate and learn from and appreciate and actually love, and be grateful for. So the energy is really, it's kind of like pain. How I see it is when you have pain in your body, we're so hovering in the mind, or we're so locked into the mind, we're literally more up here. So it's like a
Mm.
like a drone above your head. That's how I see it. And then the pain, let's say we have pain, so anxiety will be like, oh my god, what is this? Or oh my gosh, this hurts, this must mean something. And so then that's bringing you back into your body. So like I have a lot of those moments, so it's obvious that I'm very disassociated a lot of time, and that pain is bringing us back into the body. So because what happens as soon as we're in pain, we focus straight on it. So if I have knee pain, I can't think about blah, 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 who I was like arguing in my head about. I'm thinking about my knee pain and da, da, da. The storyline is, we'll talk about that later, but it usually will go into a story, and that's how you know it's anxiety. But yeah,
Mm.
the pain is usually what gets us back into the body. But as long as we have like no expectation and no trying to figure it out, can we like really be able to sit in it in that way? And one more thing about this is that I have an example. I was recently on a plane, and I don't do well on plane rides just because same thing. I don't do well in elevators or roller I will not go on a roller coaster. I am not a stomach flipper type of personality. And but I had this whole thing where I had to get on the plane, and this other thing didn't work out. And I was like, okay, this is just how it's going to happen. I have to not get over this. I have to work with it.
Mm.
And so I just really surrendered to it. And then everything actually was super easy. And that's another really great sign when everything else is easy, but your anxiety is inflamed. And then you're like, okay, this is giving me space to actually work with this instead of trying to put out fires other places. But it's sometimes also good when you do have a whole bunch of fires to put out because you can't focus on your anxiety,
Right.
so both are good. Anyway, it's on the plane, of course, mildly freaking out. I joke that Steve always sits because I have my two kids, so it's 3 seat, and then Steve sits right across from me. So we always like hold hands playing Red Rover with the cart that's about to like come down and like break our hands apart. Anyway, I actually didn't hold hands with him for the first time, and that was purposeful. And
Mm-hmm.
he's just like, "Are you okay?" I said, "Just fine." I wasn't fine, but I was going to convince myself that I was just fine.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I could feel the anxiety come up, and I was like, "Oh my God, oh my God." And it was happening. And I all of a sudden got super strict. And I kind of like talk bad to myself, not in like a negative like way, but in a very kind of parental, but like I'm a teenager parental kind
Mm-hmm.
of way. And I was just like, get it together right now, Vanessa. Get in your body. I was like, can you feel your seat? No, you can't because you're hovering. Get in your seat of your seat, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm like, unclench your hands. I'm like, stop it. I'm like, unclench your hands. So I get like kind of bossy because I actually listen to that to myself, not if somebody else does it, to myself. And I started kind of really forcing myself. I forced myself to be safe. So that was really, really powerful. And I was really able to kind of narrow it in that way. Okay, hold on for 1 second. So Kathy O'Brien says, what if your fear in a situation is founded because of emotional and mental abuse in that situation? Yes, this is definitely what we're going to talk about. This is in this in turn is freezing you up. This is stemming from experience with the person. Yeah, it's a great question. Maybe we should, can we talk about that right now? Are you good with that or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Talking to me? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, awesome. So the so so when it's stemmed, like I always think of like anxiety of like when it's coming, where is it coming from? Is it coming from a story in your head, or is it coming from like an actual reality? A lot of my anxiety actually comes from an actual reality. Like something happens and then I have super anxiety about it, rather than some people it's very mental and trying to think about how to protect themselves, like EO said, and so forth. So I'm just going to tap into that, and then I'll let EO answer that too. For me, it's very kind of like the situation happens first and then I get really anxious. um, I have to convince myself first that I have already been safe. So I kind of go back to what was happening 5 minutes ago. Okay. So was I fearing my life and, oh my God, this is too much emotional trauma for me. I can't process this. It's just usually more the body saying, I can't process this. Or it's the body saying, I feel too much. Okay. And now I'm caught off guard. And if I'm caught off guard, I don't like that. Who likes it? Because the body, everything, the psyche wants to know. It doesn't like feeling, well, let's see. Let's be curious and be in possibility. So that's so when I see that, and I usually try to put my hand over my heart, wherever I'm really feeling the trauma, I try to locate it in the body, and then I just am able to give it my presence. And then I do other things of what methods, which we'll discuss right after. Okay, so yeah, what do you feel?
I think that happens to a lot of us. There are people in our
Mhm.
lives who are close to us or have been who wounded us in some ways that um, stick with us. And I think for me, there's a difference between stress and anxiety. Like the stress of knowing I might have to run into this person or I might have to deal with the person, say it's in my extended family. And then PTSD is real and that does live in the body, and um, you might be like, I can deal with this. And then all of a sudden you realize your heart's racing, again, like you're shutting down maybe, or however your body reacts. So I think um, that is absolutely normal. And I think the first step is to recognize it and accept it. And I think, at least with anxiety, for me, anxiety tends to be more nebulous. I don't know what's going on. You know, there's something going on that I need to probably pay attention to, or going to a social situation, right? It's just like I don't want to. Like I just have all these. But with something that feels a little bit more grounded in an experience with this particular person, I think that is completely legit. Also, like there's okay not to have like if you can avoid that person, like sometimes and we can't avoid everyone, but it's okay to have boundaries. And um, so um, but just maybe even thinking about that person. Now that might be different, right? Like if you're farther away, you might not be interacting, you might just have a memory, and that might be something for like in my case would be something that I could then process. I have a better shot at like getting my hands wrapped around, right? So um, a um, therapist of mine once gave me this piece of paper, which I actually have in front of me, and it was written by a woman named Catherine Pittman, and it's called Anxiety's Game, and it's a lot of what we're talking about, and it's a four four fun facts. So this is the game that anxiety wants you to play. The first one is like when we have fearful or worrisome thoughts, um, is it wants anxiety wants us to take it like as a serious threat. And in the moment, we're having all the physiological symptoms, and it might take a while to like calm down to be able to think, take a step back from it. It wants us to, once we are scared and worried, it wants us to try and get rid of those thoughts. So much like you were saying, Vanessa, sitting in with your body, sitting with your pain, sitting with your anxiety, it's not easy. It's not, I remember it's like someone described it as like anxiety knocks at the door, you look up and you're like, oh crap, there's anxiety. Not everyone's like, oh, hello, that's interesting. Why are you here? It's like, no, I'm sweating and I just fight or flight. I just want to get out of the situation. Um, the third rule of the game is it wants you to back away. It wants you to assume that you don't have what it takes to solve this situation. And then lastly, anytime you experience anxiety, assume there is real danger. Now, with a person, that danger may be real, and like that is, a legitimate situation. And then there are four um, remedies. Um, it's um, not assuming it's real. Being like, okay, these are my thoughts. I'm in a situation in my house just by myself. Okay, this like you're saying, I am safe. I was safe 5 minutes ago. Um, and don't if you're able to, don't run away. Don't pick up. For me, I would pick up my phone, start scrolling, just get anything that would diffuse my mind. But as soon as I put my phone down, it was there and it was twice as bad. Um, so that's a trap that I found myself in. Um, Now, sometimes I would have to do that for a minute and be like, okay, maybe my heart rate comes down, but then for me, I would have to try and face it. Um, and, um, and then, oh, be non-judgmental. I think that's one thing we all do, which is really hard. Is like when we experience something that's real, that's happening in our bodies, we're like, I'm being crazy, or I'm being childish, or I am being silly, or I should be over this by now. And I think the care that we can give ourselves and surrounding ourselves with people who understand, maybe they have similar experiences, but it's like if they themselves will not be judgmental towards us, we cannot, and we in turn will not be as judgmental with ourselves. And then hopefully you maybe also in that process developing a relationship where it's a reciprocal um, you know support. So I think there's some more comments. I don't have my glasses on, so I didn't want to just keep rambling if there was something I missed
No,
that someone was responding to.
that's perfect. I mean, what
Yeah.
you just said, that's just exactly, I think what she's asking also. And she says, actually, she's like, it's in actual reality. She's like, when
Yes.
it's through intermittent reinforcement, it's really hard to tell.
Mm.
Yeah, it's kind of like exactly what EO said. It's like breaking it down. And I would definitely look that up, the Catherine Pittman
Yeah.
anxiety game,
The
if that's
anxiety's
who
game.
it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, anxiety scheme. Yeah. Because it's really it's you have to have tools of management. It's not like he was saying, it's like you don't you're not going to like beat yourself up of because you're already at this insecurity. You know what I'm saying? Something's quote wrong with me. I need to fix it. I don't know how to fix it. And so therefore I'm just going to do my fight or flight type of situation, like get out of here or save myself, you know? And it's just kind of like the other thing is that in when you know to expect this or when someone's around, try to do the work prior. So the work is like, how can I be centered when I know these triggers are going to come up, you know, and some of those things are very simple of, hey, I'm just going to excuse myself to the bathroom, or hey, I'm going to do little things that you that are way too past your field of being able to handle, but you're going to take care of yourself. It's kind of like imagine you were to be your own parent and that loving parent, the real loving parent who is you know, would be like, I know exactly how you feel. How can I help you? Oh, okay. I'm going to take you away from the situation and then we're going to come back and then we're going to go away again and then we're going to come back. And then it's like, oh, okay, wait a second. I need to go now. You know what I'm saying? So you're going to find ways and tools, and we'll discuss that also of the other tools of how to do that. But I would suggest also to do it beforehand. So if you know this is going to arise, there's a lot of ways to do things to help prepare the body so it's not just blasted, because it sounds like to me that you're kind of putting yourself in a very raw, vulnerable state. You know what I'm saying? Like you only put children in safe spaces. So put yourself in a safe space. You know, you don't just feed them to the wolves kind of thing. So
Mhm.
you're probably not in a safe space that you can handle that, you know, and then you'll be able to have more and more um safety in the body, and then you're able to start eventually being able to get to that level where you can handle the hard thing, the really really hard things like that. And usually, which I always think is funny, the really really hard things end up going away because they don't even need to exist any longer, you know, because they are kind of an offering for us on a higher level. Okay, so let's go to the next thing. um yeah, hold on for actually 1 second. All right. I have a lot. I have a lot written. I was just like, I don't know. Like, I'm always like, oh, I want to talk about this. One of the things I was trying, really thinking about is that were my goal for anxiety or anxiousness or whatever the label is shifting it from I need to know into I trust or I entertain the possibility. And it's kind of like, again, like what I was talking about, it's not trusting, it's like trusting in what, and it's like, it's not someone or something, but trusting that what is happening is supposed to be happening. So that is a very intuitive marker that we want more activation of for ourselves in how to deal with everyday life, is that what is happening is supposed to be happening. So the universe doesn't make mistakes. It's not like, but it's also who is creating this, who is experiencing this. You know what I'm saying? So all those like bigger questions come into play, and that's really only questions that you can answer yourself. Nobody could tell you those answers. But to me, one of the things I do is I really understand, and through a lot of, I'm going to kind of plug the Byron Katie, the work, because that has been like an absolute lifesaver for me because it really deals with the mental, your mental agility and how to like unlock yourself and unblock yourself. But it's so you could go to thework.com. That's one of the things. But trusting in what is happening is supposed to be happening. It's that allowability. And when we allow something to happen, we stop fighting that, but recognizing where we're not, where we actually aren't feeling safe, and start tending to our own garden and how to nurture that, because it is very important not to convince yourself that you're safe, but to actually feel your safety. Because when you feel your safety, then you could have a mature response and you're not triggered. You know what I'm saying? You're not pulled out of your body. Okay, so so the next question is, when did we first, I'm going to go to EO first. When did we first experience a type of anxiety in our own lives? So when did you kind of,
That is a great question. I've been walking around with, since I read that earlier, I've been walking around asking myself that question. And I think it is one of those sensations that's kind of been with me my whole life. I think I was an adventurous kid, but I was also, I think, an anxious kid. I was afraid of a lot of things. Um, I had one of my parents, my biological father. Um, he and my mom split when I was little, like 2 or something. So the fear of loss and the fear of abandonment, that was like my boogeyman. I didn't even know it at the time, but I think I was really afraid of um, putting myself in the situation where like I would lose a parent or I'd be taken away from them. So I didn't do any, like, I avoided a lot of uh, situations that I deemed dangerous, in my mind, my childhood mind. So anxiety has been with me my whole life. And but I think I really recognize it for what it was. Well, in hindsight now, I realize the night before I went to 6th grade. So I was going from like elementary school to middle school, and I was terrified. But I wasn't just. I was so anxious, and it was growing over time, like anxiety does. And I think for me, at least, it's like starts off often as a nagging feeling and a very nebulous sense of something bad could happen, and then it grows and it grows and it grows. And so the night before, I basically couldn't sleep. Um, but all that is to say that, like, I think it's been with me my whole life. And then um, I had, luckily, good parents, and so I think I was able to talk about it, and I was able to have someone kind of provide contradictions, which I think is a very, well, for me, was very helpful. And so yeah, I think it's always kind of been there. And sometimes it was like a bullhorn in my ear in my 20s. It was pretty hard. And then I started kind of deconstructing, going diving into my past and figuring out what, you know, talking to a professional, and kind of also like trusting my intuition a little bit more and listening, trusting myself. And it all was this overlapping kind of experience that really started in my 30s. And uh, so now I can kind of parse out like what was anxiety, what was legitimate, like fear about something that was legitimate. One of the things I also love as a question is like, how do we know if what I'm feeling is intuition? Like, I should really pay attention to this right now, or is this the voice in my head that is actually, it's telling me something, but it's not always helpful, And so that was um, something that I had to kind of figure out over time as well. So it's always been there. To answer your question.
I love that. I feel the same way. Like when I asked that question, I was like, I don't even know. I couldn't even write down. That was the last one I answered because like,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm the same thing with like you. Like I was adventurous, but I wasn't adventurous in certain stuff. I was adventurous in independence, like
Mm,
almost hyper independent, I would say. I was very adventurous in that way, but I was always an anxious kid in the sense of kind of I always thought I was going to die.
mm,
And that was also a very kind of verbal or known fact. I did have things in my childhood that I was told that I was going to die. So I have that belief system was planted very early for me. And so I didn't know that I could think a different thought or there was a different possibility. So that was always an undercurrent. And I just lived with that. And then I realized now it's really living in my body, even though our bodies change, even cellularly, all the time for,
mhm.
every 7 years you have a full new body. something like that. So,
Yeah.
some that kind of stuff. But I feel like, so I wrote it, my answer was in the womb. And that's kind of true, even epigenetically and so forth. It's just like, well, what's the father's, and also what's the mother's, and what's the father's imprint too, because it's just kind of like that energy field and that reception. So, it goes beyond time and in connection and so forth. But and we're what, an egg inside of an egg, so we're technically in our grandmother's womb, I think that goes, or something like that. Sorry, I'm chasing fairies and dust. Anyway, so that kind of stuff. So it's really where it begins, I think, is for all of us, somewhere uh, from conception or even prior to conception or stuff. Who's carrying, and that gets uh, translated, into what we understand. So I will say I had a very interesting experience. I've had two near death experiences, so NDEs. And so I had one, and that was when I had a car that almost hit me, and my mom saw it also, and she didn't understand how I got to the other side of the road. Neither did I. I thought I flew like a little angel. I have no idea. And then somebody who was waiting for me saw the same thing, but she didn't know what was happening. I was really young. So that kind of started realizing that, oh, I could have died, and I was around 7 or something like that time. And then I had another one at age 15. And 15 was like a really big near death experience. And you could go on my YouTube channel and listen to that. I do a whole entire video about that. But the reason I'm telling you about that is because during that, when I was around 15 or whatever, and I had that, one of my biggest problems was coming back into my body. So when I was out of my body and it wasn't heaven, but it was like this in between space. I don't know what to call it. Um, it was just kind of like before you get to heaven, if you want to call it that. I don't know. Maybe it was heaven. I have no idea. But it was very dark and extremely loving. It was beyond love that we could even comprehend here. But I remember God. It wasn't even God. The only reason I say God is because that's how I could understand it by talking about it. It was God, I don't even think was amoeba, but I had to say amoeba, to understand it, because I'd be like, blah, just blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so this energy that was me, but more all knowing, I guess, I don't know, um, convinced me, not through words, but through a greater understanding, that I had to go back. And I remember arguing with God and being like, there's no way I could go back. I can't fit in that tiny body. I'm looking at the body, and I was like, I'm not looking, but I'm observing the body energy. And I was like, there's no way I could fit. I am so big here, da, da, da. So the reason I'm telling you this is that getting back into the body was really, really hard for me. So then finally I, come to back to life, whatever. And then I, go back to school, my regular school day, or whatever. And I used to go from art to English class. And there was enormous amounts of anxiety. And during that time, I remember I started, I was never, I hate blood. So I was like, I was never one of those people that would like cut or anything like that. But I would pinch myself hard enough where it could make a mark or something like that. And the reason I did is because I felt like going from art class to something that I am naturally like, oh, this is my element. I'm here. It's fun. I hated rules in art, but whatever. I would be like, all right, fine, you're school. And then I was going to English class, something that I actually really enjoyed, but I couldn't do, my brain didn't work that way. So that transitioned from that class to the next class. I went out of my body every single day like clockwork. And it was like I was a clown and I had these giant shoes on. And I remember I would be like literally attached to my body, but I was like around a foot or more out of my body. And it was horrible. It was the worst feeling in the world, because I thought I was going to first bang into something, because I felt like pushed out of my body. So on a bigger level, we'll call it a soul level, but just a bigger level, I did not want to. Okay. And so, my will as a 15-year-old is I don't want to. And nothing is going to like happen of being like, oh, well, just be okay with this. This time will pass. I wasn't mature enough in that way. So the way I got myself in body was literally, pinching myself and making marks all over my arm to bring pain into the body. Now, one of the things, like, still to this day, I have a really hard time with this. I have a hard time even talking about it, but um, I can't look in a mirror and say, "Who are you?" Or, like, really, who are you? A lot of times if I go by a mirror and I've been, like, in something and really talking about stuff, that kind of stuff makes me feel that I am so deep into, like, let's say tech stuff or whatever, and then all of a sudden I see myself in a mirror and I get kind of like, whoa, what's happening? So I get a little kicked out. And when I get kicked out, if I see a mirror, I won't know who I am. Like, I don't, like, I'm like, who is that? Like, it's like this weird trip of a feeling. And again, it's just body memory in that way. So I think, like, my thing is like, when the question was, when did we first experience a type of anxiety in our lives? I would say those kind of like pinpointed moments. And so, like, now all I'm doing is trying to find out constantly how to get into my body and know that I fit, know that it's safe, because getting out of my body is very easy for me. Like, when people are like, "Oh, I do transcendental meditation," and it's just like, and I'm just trying to, like, elevate. I'm like, "Oh God, like, that is my last thing I want to do. I do not want to do, like, floaty meditation, because I could get out like that." My problem is getting back in. And so that's stuff that I work on a continual basis. Um, yeah, so it's too easy to go out and it's too hard to fit.
Yeah.
The other thing I really wanted to talk about is, yeah, so a lot of the anxiety we always, and I think you and I were talking about this, is that if it's real or kind of self-manifested. And I kind of, I say, but how I treat, this is, hold on, how I treat this is this experience. Yeah, is this experience is going through my body in present moment.
Hmm.
It's where my responsibility is. So my responsibility is to acknowledge what is going through my body. It's responsibility is the ability to respond. And
Hmm.
so when we do that, we change the dynamic again from seeking outward and trying to get answers outside of ourselves, and stop getting answers, but start coming back home, and coming back to our birthplace, you know what I'm saying, of our arrival, and just sitting with us without an opinion. It's kind of like I always say, energy doesn't have an opinion. So when we go and allow this to come up, we just register ourselves back home and allow that to, if it wants to have a conversation, if it wants to illuminate us, if it wants to share something that it's trying to release, because usually if it's trauma, it's not coming up to torture you, it's coming up to release. So it's just kind of like, but we, a lot, me included, have a really hard time believing that. We just think, oh my God, we need to fix it. We are our own doctors, we are our own surgeons, so it's just like, get in there and fix it. We're designed to do that, because that's how we, quote, live. We keep ourselves alive. But it's just like, what if we stop doing it from the place of expiration, and that this is killing us, and do all the things that you and I are talking about, of like, and talking to yourself of like, is this real? You know what I'm saying? Or is it real, but it doesn't need our immediacy of action, and then we could sit in that space and give it time, like a therapist, you know what I'm saying, and just be able to be available for what is arising.
Hmm.
Okay, did you want to say anything else about that?
No, I think that's
Okay.
pretty spot on. Yeah,
Okay.
I think being able to sit with, if it's easier said than done, than done. It is hard to sit with it, but I think having a curiosity and an acceptance and a judgment-free experience of it, those those answers, at least for me, did come. So that was nice to,
Hmm.
um, and it takes time. I think for me, it's like figuring out what things I do that anchor me, or ground me more. So I like being in nature. Most people do, but like, there's a few spots that are very special for me. So if I am feeling particularly bad, I would go for a walk, just moving my body, getting my nervous system to like relax. And then being in the woods, people find different things meditative. Some people it's bike riding, some people it's swimming, some people, for me, it's driving sometimes if it's a beautiful area. So
Mhm.
it's unknowing yourself and knowing kind of how to ease yourself into that space of curiosity, um, and what it takes to drop that adrenaline down, to get to that point.
Mhm.
Um, and n- not all answers come at the same speed. Sometimes they come in bunches. And I'm a really unique thing happened, and there's tons of science to back this up. Um, an experience where I was sitting by myself. I'd been working on something in my life that was hard for a long time. It was making me feel crappy like regularly, and I couldn't figure out what it was, what the root of it was. And I was asking questions. Is it this? And I would sit with it and see how it felt in the body. I'm like, nah, that's not it. And I'd be like, how about this? I'm like, it feels closer. And then when I nailed it, I was sitting with my eyes closed, and I opened up my eyes, and all the colors were twice as vivid. And this is a phenomenon that's well understood in science. It's what our brain, how our brains perceive it, but is when anxiety and stress or trauma, it's like when the brain finally is either free of it or connects with it, and you just have that feeling where you can feel it, where you're like, and then I was like in vivid color, and it didn't last forever. And I have a billion other things to go through, but it was that one. It was a kind of a breakthrough moment. It was one of the pieces of the puzzles that snapped into place, and I was like, okay. And then that builds for me. It built trust in myself, but it built trust in the process, and being curious, and kind of allowed me the next time. It made it a little easier to do that process and go back inside myself and kind of start rooting around. So I guess that's all I have to add for that right now.
I love that.
Yeah,
Yeah. And then, so one of the people, commenters, Zach, says, "Hello, I need help with OCD." And I love this question. So, OCD, origins, perspective, ways to diminish it, control its disruptiveness, seeking clarity and peace. Thank you. So, I'm going to let you maybe tap into that, EO, and then
sure.
I could also tap into that afterward.
Again, all I have is my own anecdotal experience and conversations I've had. Um, I know a lot of people have had stints with OCD. They've not been diagnosed, but like clearly behaviors that would fall kind of in that general category. Um, and it often is, I mean, I think it's kind of hard. I think in my kind of limited experience, um, it was, I was already in a kind of a bad place. I think it was a OCD. I mean, so for some people, it's more fundamental and been around with them longer, right? Like we talked about anxiety being with us our whole lives. I think some people, it's like OCD has been with them their whole life. For me, it was like a very relatively kind of had been a new experience or new reality, that I was experiencing, and I think for other people, it's been kind of shorter, longer. So I think it is all part of this. I think part of the spectrum. I think finding, I mean, on some level, finding a good, someone who you can talk to. That I know everyone I know who's gone to see any kind of counselor or therapist. It doesn't always click, and it's pretty obvious when it doesn't. And some people stick around longer than they should, just because and then you like think, oh, I got to start over again with someone new. So finding someone that will listen, that you can start processing with, that you trust, and you'll start to feel that for me, and I think my other friends as well. You start to feel it in your body, right? It's like that, like, oh, there's a connection here, like, um, and I mean, honestly, it's not an area that I know a whole lot about, but um, my understanding is that it can, it's akin to and cousins with anxiety, right? Like it is a way for me of gaining control in my life when it felt out of control. And realized that like for me, like, and this was something that was like wonderfully handed down from a family member, an elder family member, is like a fear of germs. I was a germaphobe, bad, like really bad, and it was disruptive in my life, and
Right.
it was
Mm.
something that I was able to work through. But what happened was I had to go down 3 levels and start working in at the foundational elements of like what's going on. Why am I so unhappy? Like why am I needing to control this one element of my life? Like what feels so out of control? And these are the questions I asked myself because they felt pertinent to me. As I was asking them, I could feel that I was getting a hook into something. And so people will ask different questions for themselves and they'll get different answers. Um, and I didn't have anyone professionally who could help me navigate. So, I made some mistakes, but I think that's my general take on OCD. And kind of, I don't know if for person who joined us, I don't know if this is something that's been a long term thing or a short term thing. I don't know, but it is. I think we so often are told to cube things into their own little segments when in fact they are kind of so much of what's going on with us is intermeshed. So it starts to be this knot that we all have to kind of unwind, and we find that we have all these parts to us that have different names, and then I think when they present themselves so um, apparently, then they get your name. You're like, oh, you have this. So yeah, I think I'll stop there. Yeah.
That's yeah, super. Yeah, I love that. And I just to add on to what Io was saying is that especially for germs, I'm the same. Like I really had. I mean, I went so far where I like joined like a eco-friendly cleaning group, and I was selling stuff to like be like it's germ free, and even though germs are great, you know what I'm saying? But like
Yeah.
I had this like incessant need to like, and I still do. It's not like it's gone. That's the thing. We're not doing things. I've learned that it's not to get rid of it, it's to use it, so you're using the energy, so it's not just running wild. It's like it's not a wild kid inside of me being like, "Wah," instead I'm like putting it to work, so like one of the things is just like, oh, now my kids, when I'm like wash your hands like every single time they get in the house, and it's just like not because we're dirty, because we're not spreading things on everywhere else, you know what I'm saying? And it's just like things that we can go and do, like even like I said, I joined a cleaning whatever thing, and that helped me, not because now I actually don't even use it, because in my mind I'm like, oh, I feel clean just because I know it's there and I know it's available,
Mhm.
not because I have to use it. So it broke that kind of OCD, and I don't have OCDs as a disorder, but I do definitely did have bouts of it, in that
Mhm.
way. So one of the things that I do, so oh, the other thing about the germs thing is that I also question, is it mine?
Mm.
Many times it's not, it doesn't always start with me. It could have been a belief from handed down to me, and that belief that was in my environment, that something's dirty, that you will get sick. I found out watching childhood videos that that was a belief, from elders, that don't touch her, you might get her sick, da 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 da. So there's a lot of that kind of paranoia, and rightfully so. That was their belief system. There's nothing wrong with their belief system, but that I adhere to that. You know what I'm saying? So really, whenever I have any type of anxiety or any type of thing in this field, is I always ask, is it mine?
Mm.
Or where did it come from? Because
Yeah.
it might not be all mine, and most chances are it's not all mine. The other thing of what I do with OCD is I find things to do opposite. So if I'm just like doing, and I found this really works a lot with a lot of different things, because we're always trying to control because we don't feel safe, and this is kind of like the whole thing of what we're talking about is we don't feel safe, essentially. And we're trying to protect, as Io said, we're trying to protect ourselves. So in that, one of the ways to do stuff is do silly things that are opposite. So let's say you take something that you obviously throw a kickball, not a hard ball. You throw a kickball or whatever up in the air and you catch it. You're conditioned to be like, yeah, I'm going to catch it, you know? Well, put a blindfold on. So you're exercising yourself of throwing up a ball. Now you have a blindfold on. Who knows if you catch it? So you allow yourself the humiliation of, I mean, obviously you might not want to do this on your front lawn, but it's just like you're allowing yourself the humiliation that you won't catch it, but you're still safe even if you're not in control. So you're doing things that aren't in control but have like no meaning, you know what I'm saying? It doesn't, and then go farther, but safely. You know what I'm saying? So do little things that entice you of being like, I wonder how I can allow what's happening and see, like it's kind of like, to me it's like pushing it out to the universe and saying, hey, how are you going to show up?
Mm.
So one of the things I've been doing recently is that I have certain needs that need to be met. You know what I'm saying? It's just like real serious things. And I'm kind of like, and I've been pushing against the universe, not against it. I've been almost like pushing the matrix. So you're pushing like that veil of being like, your turn. I'm not doing this. I'm not doing it all, you know? And so I'm giving it up. I'm surrendering this, but not out of my control. Instead, like for instance, I'm figuring out my kids' schooling. I cannot figure it out. Okay. So, because if they're homeschooled or which place, because I live two different places, blah blah blah. What do I do? This is something really important that needs to be figured out right now, you know. And then I was like, well, I know what I want, but that's not showing up. So what do I do? Okay, Vanessa, do the opposite. So I do the opposite. So now all I'm going to do is probably put them actually in a school, sign it up, do all the things that I don't really want to do, but I'm going to do it anyway. Because what happens is that speeds up the universe is basically saying, oh, you're ready. You know what I'm
Mm.
saying? You're ready for that availability. And it's putting it out, it's releasing the control, it's surrendering, but without surrendering it all. You're still taking action, you're still using that energy towards something, you know, on a
Mm.
higher level, but it's surrendering it enough that whatever really needs to come is going to come. So I just did this with an RV. I really needed to get an RV. I needed, because we were planning on traveling and doing kind of a road school situation. And then I surrendered it. I was like, okay, we'll make our bus an RV. We were getting seats for it. And I was just like, that's what's going to happen. I don't want to do this, but that's what's going to happen. Starting to put money into it. That's a big universal, like, you know, so you're pushing against kind of like almost your own veil. You're pushing against your own walls. You know what I'm saying? That's keeping you, quote, safe. It's not keeping you safe, but it's keeping you what you believe is safe, your own little womb of a universe, you know, and you're pushing against that by almost like setting down an offering, kind of like what, like in Hinduism or Tibetan culture, they're always going to do an offering. So you're setting the offering of, here's what I want, but now I'm walking away. You know, I'm not being like, where is it? What's happening? Are you ready? Why isn't it providing for me? You know, and then you're doing the opposite. So when I tried to get pregnant, what did I do? I spent 10 years trying to get pregnant, 11 years trying to get pregnant. I did everything possible to try to get pregnant. I was perfect. I did ate super well. I didn't go on vacations because, oh my gosh, I could get a migraine and I couldn't take migraine medicine if I got pregnant. It was serious. Like I was super stuck. And because of that, then all of a sudden, a light bulb moment around 11 years before or after trying so hard, and all of a sudden I said, I'm going to do whatever the heck I want. I went outside, I spray painted these M&M rocks for my sister's birthday. I breathed in all the fumes. I was like, I went like crazy. I was just like, I don't care. I would never ever do that, like ever, because what if I messed up my chances? You know what I'm saying? So that, but that was habitual. So I broke the habit of being myself, you
Mm.
know what I'm saying, and how I worked. So that kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden, literally, I don't know, it was like a couple weeks later or something like that, I got pregnant. 11 years later, you know, and all these other things happened, but that kind of stuff. So I always say when people ask me, like, well, how did you do that? Or how do the opposite? So if you're trying, I mean, literally, if you're checking your stove every single 5 minutes, I'm not saying turn on the stove and walk away. You know what I'm saying? But it's just like do things that are safe and that give you this sense of being like of reminding yourself and reminding the body and the greater understanding that nothing actually doom and gloom is going to happen because I already did this. I did what my biggest fear is, you know what I'm
Yeah,
saying? But make it micro, so in a safe micro way. That
yeah,
was just
I like
what
the
I
idea of creating safe ways to create contradictions for yourself that
yes,
contradict
that's
that's it.
yeah.
So yeah, I like that.
I love that word. What you said last time is the contradiction. I think
Yeah,
that was such a perfect word.
yeah, and I think
Yeah.
contradictions are great for anxiety as well. And I think it's good to have those on hand. I think journaling can be a great way to write things down, and you go back and forget they even said them, right? So there's wisdom that can be put down from yourself and the universe into, um, and then you can. There's a lot of good ways to create, I think, contradictions. Having people that can help you with them. Having a good friend or a partner and being like, when I get like this, I need to be reminded of these three things. I need to be
Yeah.
reminded that, like, and oftentimes people who have worked with their own anxiety, you can just have a real conversation. They're not going to be freaked out because they're like, oh, I don't know what to do. They're feeling anxious. But as opposed to people like, yeah, this is part of the human experience. What do you need? How can I help? Or you just need to sit here. And so just having that, I think that's really helpful. Um, and yeah, people with good energy, put them around you. you know,
Yeah,
so
and people that don't fix you,
right, they're not
because
going to try,
there's
right?
nothing. Yeah, and there's nothing worse to me that when people give advice, like I'm like, oh my God. So sometimes even saying that, just be like, I can't handle advice right now.
Yeah,
I just really need to be heard. And
yeah,
can you sit with me? And they have the option to say no,
yeah,
but it's like, can you sit with me in this without giving me advice? And they
yeah.
well, some can, some can't, and that's okay,
Right.
but
And yeah,
find
exactly.
those people who can.
Yeah, exactly. The ones who can, that's great. And I think part of having, for me, it's like taking control of anxiety is sometimes coming up with a plan. And it might not work well, but just knowing that, like, okay, these are like the three levels, right? I'm gonna, like, level one, this is what I'm gonna do. If this doesn't work, this was gonna do. If it goes to the next level, these are the four things I'm gonna try. And just, or you have those two or three things that are like, okay, I can go back to this, that are, you know, not harmful to oneself. Um, and I think just knowing, like, okay, like, trusting in myself that I have a plan and that I have that agency and that resource of self, that I um, can work through it. So
Yeah, and not be like battered because of it.
yeah, exactly, because
Yeah.
it's exhausting. Like, we all know how exhausting anxiety is. It's like once that anxiety wears off, it's like we all just want to take a nap or we just want to watch, like, something on Netflix, right? It's like it's draining. It's hard on the body and it's hard on the mind. So yeah. And then also have, like, a think how you're gonna recover. Just like for
Mhm.
people who are introverts, you're gonna be in a big social situation, being like, I know that I'm gonna need an hour afterwards. I'm gonna read or go for a walk by myself or just, like, hang out with the cat. Like, um, and once I know that about myself, then I can share that with the people around me and being like, I'm not, this is just, this is who I am and this is what I need. And then people, I think people want to help also. People want to know how to support us. So if you can tell them, if there's something that that works, they can be like, oh, can I, like, get you a glass of, like, cold water? No, like, for the scientific world, the vagus nerve, which runs from your brain down to your heart, down to your gut, um, it responds well to ice, so to cold. So you can put cold on your face. You can drink really cold water. That's a way to stimulate the vagus nerve, which then regulates your heart rate. Um, and I think, so. That's, like, just a life hack that I've heard a bunch of doctors talk about.
It does work because I used to always
Yeah,
do it on my wrist, like my inner
yeah,
wrist, just like
yep,
literally take an ice pack. Because again, it's bringing, it's like not pain in a bad way, but it's
Right.
like it brings all your attention to that area. And
Right.
humming also is phenomenal for
Yeah.
vagus nerve
Yeah. And movement.
revitalization.
Like if you
Hmm.
like to
Yeah.
dance, if you can
Yes.
dance, and for me, it was moving my body was playing soccer. Like I'd feel miserable, and if I could get out, I would always be like, "Hey, you wanna kick a ball around?" I'm like, "Yeah." And so I think they actually saw this one person, he's like, "Yeah, just shake. Just kind of like get up and
Yes.
shake around." It seems silly, like, think about, like, what three-year-olds do when they have too much energy, right? Do that, and it helps. I'm not saying it knocks it down 100%, but there are a lot of just really great things. And like, for a lot of people who have, like, for example, COVID has affected a lot of people's autonomic nervous system. That's the part of our nervous system that we don't think about that operates our digestive system and all the things that move that the brain tells us, but we don't think about it. We don't have to think about it, which is great. Um, but the vagus nerve, like we talked about, can be affected as part of that. And so there'll be people who will have what they call tachycardia, which is your heart rate goes up, and so you will have a raised elevated heart rate, so it feels like anxiety. That's another way of realizing, is this real or is this not? But you still have to deal with um, the physiological symptoms, which is the same way you would kind of do with anxiety. It's like, okay, sitting for a second, taking, for me, I take note of what's happening. Am I worried about something? Did something happen that would cause me to feel this way? No. Oh, this might be my heart because I had COVID, which is literally what happened. So then I'm like, okay, what are like the four things? I got that plan, right? I have a partner who's like, can I get you a glass of cold water? I'm like, that'd be excellent. Throw some in my face, I jump around, you know, go for a walk. Um, and so I have a toolbox that I've developed, and everyone will have their own in
Mhm.
time. Some things are a little bit, like the things I was talking about, they're a little bit more like universal, and then we'll find the ones that are like our like secret weapons. And so that's also kind of just like a physiological kind of interesting thing, because my background is not only in art, but it's also in medicine. I'm not a physician, I am not a researcher, but I'm kind of a science nerd. So that's kind of, I like to go find things in Western science that make sense and that are like that work, and then there's things that clearly don't, and then I find other answers that work. So yeah, like, I think it's just like it's a journey that we're all on. So
Yeah, so I love that. And by the way, like everything you said, like that's exactly those are all the things that for me work for me too.
yeah.
Especially, I just did it just recently. We were almost in a car accident a couple of months ago in Florida, and
Mm,
my kids were with me. It was just my kids and I, and this person cut and crossed 3 lanes right in front. I was like, I can't believe, like, there was a
yeah.
lot of grace there. I was grateful that we didn't have to go through a car accident. If we did, that was exactly what was supposed to happen. If, but we didn't, and the charge of that energy that
Yeah.
happened, my kids were in complete like shock of like, just I could feel it from their bodies. And it was really interesting. And so immediately I was like, shake it out, just shake it. Like,
Yeah.
I didn't pull over, I don't think, but we just like violently, like, oh, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, just, and it was amazing of the difference
Yeah.
of energetically, because you don't want that trapped in the body. Because
Yeah.
that, to me, and from what I've experienced and seen, a lot of disease stems from that,
Mm,
because it's trapped emotions in the body, not like disease is bad, but disease tends to get, it's just a trapped emotion, so
sure.
we really want to kind of like be able to shake that out energetically,
Yeah.
and physically. Okay, so just to so we don't go too far over, but
Yeah.
one of the things if we want to just touch on real quick, is it anxiety or intuition?
I love that.
And
That's
so
such a great
I
question.
know, so my thing is, I always say, um does it have a does what I found out is, does it have a story after?
Mm,
So if it has a story after, it's usually anxiety or
mm,
fear, that kind of stuff. If it's intuition, every single time I have like really big intuition, like, oh my God, is this going to happen, or whatever, I don't even have that question, is this going to happen? It already happens. So the intuition just comes usually when I am not paying attention.
Mm,
You know what I'm saying? That's the channel, that it's able to come in because I'm not paying attention. That's the beauty of it. That's why driving is such a phenomenal intuitive meditation, because you are in the element of, you're giving your brain something to do, and then your intuition is just happening. But you can't think. You literally can't like think. You're
mhm,
just kind of like feeling thinking, in that way. And that's intuition coming through. But so to me, is it anxiety or is it intuition? If it has a story after, meaning it's
mm,
like, oh, well, this could happen, or da 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 da, that's a story, and then it's anxiety. It's not really intuition, because intuition is nebulous. It doesn't have, oh, this shouldn't happen. It's not a protective mechanism. It is completely it has no polar opposite. So it has no contrast. It doesn't,
mm,
because nothing's wrong. No matter, it's our human nature of saying, oh, well, that's good or that's bad. You know what I'm saying? But intuition doesn't have a good or bad. It's just
mm,
showing you, it's preparing the body for what's coming up, so it doesn't get blasted, and it's just kind of like, anxiety to me is just kind of like fireworks inside of the body,
mm,
going off, which seems random, but it's like we have been talking, can we get to the root of that, what's really there, and addressing that. But okay,
mm.
so what is your feeling? Is it anxiety or intuition?
Yeah, I think it feels different in the body. Like anxiety, I think I'm just more, in some ways, m more familiar with. Um, and I think probably a lot of folks who in my kind of sphere would say this kind of the same thing. I think intuition, like you said, it rarely feels bad. It may be like alarming, like it might be like this is something you need to pay attention to, but it never feels like a blobby, scary thing. And there's usually like you, it's like it doesn't. There's not a trigger where I'm like, oh, I saw this thing, and
Mhm.
of course that's the thing that'll set me off. Of course, I'm feeling bad. Or is it usually it's just like almost like a voice being like, you know,
Mhm.
you need to go over there. I'm like, or like, look out for that. And I'm like, oh, yep, there. Okay, cool. And so it may be in like a kind of intense, but I find that it just it's almost like a different frequency running through my body. It's just like two different hums. One's kind of
Mhm.
grumbly and icky, and the other one's like, and it's right there. And then it kind of so it that's generally
And
kind of
it's
what.
quick.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. Like it
Mhm.
happens like that, and like usually I'm like, oh, okay, as opposed to like, what? Jeez, I just feel like, that's anxiety is that kind of feeling. And then when it's quick, I meet someone or I see someone, I'm like, in different situations, being like, that person, might need help, or that person is like, I might need to walk farther away from that person, but it's usually
Mhm.
just very clear. And it's like you said, it's very quick. So, but it just feels very different in my body. I don't think I ever necessarily confuse the two. I do know that I have a person in my life who overthinks everything, and this is how they describe themselves. They second guess themselves constantly, and they have a really hard time trusting their intuition because they don't believe that it works or that it will work for them. And it took them a long time to start. So like I don't know. I just feel bad about this. It could be intuition or blah blah blah. I'm like, I don't think it's intuition. I think you're just stressing. I think you're overthinking it. It's like it's a pattern, right? We all have patterns that our minds
Mhm.
run, and so I'm like, that sounds like a pattern, um, and over time they've learned to trust their intuition because I think it feels different to them when it's
Mhm.
intuition, and also just like don't be afraid to like try. Like it's like you might be wrong, if someone
Yeah.
or like it's again it's that like judgment free zone. Just don't just
And
kinda
you're the
feel it,
only
don't
one
think
who
it.
knows if you're wrong.
Exactly! No one else is gonna know.
Mhm.
But of course,
Mhm.
anxiety, the feeling is everyone's gonna know, right? That could be one of the things. It's like, there's so many things to be anxious about, right? Especially in this digital age where we're on social media, and I think about, like, my nieces and nephews where they're like that's a real concern. It's like and we growing up, we're both at the same age essentially, like, a lot of the dumb things we did or embarrassing things are just vague memories. They're stories, you know?
Mm,
They're not like digitally recorded for so like
yeah.
but that's a whole other live
Well,
stream.
actually, it's kind of the next question because
Oh, is it?
I just wanted to tap, right? I just wanted to tap on it really quickly,
Yeah, please.
but it's did anxiety become a new norm? And why do
Oh, right.
kids these days seem to have more anxiety?
Yeah.
There are theories that external environmental impacts exacerbate anxiety. What and how so? So you want to touch on that just real quick?
I mean,
So like
this
how
is
like
not.
did anxiety become in kids?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question, and I mean, from the evidence that I've seen and the anecdotal experience and the people I know who work at schools and run schools, I've had the conversation because especially since the pandemic, people everyone's mental health took a pretty mean hit. And
Yeah.
um, every teacher I talk to is like, the kids are not okay. You know, like it's, and I asked a couple of my friends who are high up in schools or been teachers for a long time, like, what would you, if you had a magic wand, what would you do? And they're like, I would get rid of smartphones, like immediately. Like no one under the age of 20 can have, or like, 18 or whatever, can have,
Mhm.
and then like I've, and then there's great articles coming out about technology, like tech-free schools. So basically, kids put
Mhm.
their phones in. So to answer the question, I think it is a combination. If I were to just just talking, is that it's technology, social media, and growing up in a world where everyone is telling you the world is dying and that we are on the precipice of calamity constantly, without following it up with this is what we might do about it. Or
Mm.
for me, I'm a big proponent of community, and community is the answer. One of my partners, she runs a summer program. One of her counselors, that was their tagline: "Community is the answer." And there's a lot of evidence historically, and that is true. It's like we have always had the ability to deal with calamity as humans in community. Um, it's just being able to face what is terrible. And so I think, yeah, I think especially with young kids and like, I mean, all of us really, like it's hard. These are hard times, and they, not unique to human civilization. They're hard times, but we are in one right now. And I think you combine that with too much information at your fingertips, lack of context,
Mhm.
lack of um, like in the moment, like the guidance of wisdom of it's like people are on their own little island. You know, I feel it in myself. I can feel the change earlier. So I think, um, so yeah, I think it's a combination of things, and I think it's again the idea of having a plan. Like, okay, so if this is the case, then what can we do about it? How can we you know come together to decide how we want the future to look, or what are our next steps, or how do we protect ourselves both spiritually, physically, emotionally. Um, how do we? Oh, there's a great term I heard. It's at the national organization that runs summer camps. So it's all these directors of summer camps got together, and one person gave a talk. And I wasn't there for the talk, but his tagline is "Make the joy bigger." And the concept is we can't take away the scary things, but what we can do is focus on joy and for ourselves, like what brings joy. So I knew going into November of this past year, there was going to be a lot of disruption in our lives moving forward, and politically, socially. And I was like, okay, I can't control that. I wouldn't even try. That would be too much. What I can do is like figure out how I find joy and how I ground myself, and that's been helpful. So I think um, not only so that's my like yes, I think it's a thing, and we just got to we need to I think there are things we can do. So hope that answers the
Yeah,
question. Not concisely, but
I love I love it.
yeah.
I absolutely love it. And I have just to add on to that, I would
Yeah.
definitely say like one of the things that we did personally is that since 2004, we actually, when we went to Alaska for our honeymoon, we
Yeah.
went and shut off our TV. So as soon as we
Mm.
got back, so I don't have the news. I don't have, I literally have static on my TV. I have Netflix, or
Yeah, well,
stuff
you
like
gotta
that,
have that. I mean,
but I
that's
don't. Yeah, I know, right? But I don't even watch it. Like I was just like, I watch it on my little laptop,
yeah.
but still, it's just like I don't like. That's been so like not having the news, and so my
Mm.
kids, people are like, oh, well, you don't know anything. I was like, no, I'm on Facebook a lot, so trust me, I know. But
Yeah.
I'm able to censor that,
Yeah.
because then what do I give my attention to? What do I give my energy to? You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? So all I do is get cliff notes. I don't hear about shootings. I don't hear about death. I don't hear about how people are robbed. Because I don't need to unless it's in my environment. And what can I do about it? If I could do something about it, then I'm able to hear it. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? Um, a lot of times, like if I see stuff or like that, what do? I pray. I'm
Mm.
not praying in a religious way. I'm praying in a holy way.
Mm.
They are me, I am them. Situation.
Mhm.
So, but with kids and anxiety, I have two very, 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 very spirited children.
Mm.
And what I do with them, they do have one has a device. And it was so interesting because to me, I was so like, well, obviously if I don't have TV, I'm not anti-device, but I am anti-device, in a lot of ways. I
Mm.
ended up going to a school that was very, very anti-device. But to me, it's always about balance.
Mm.
And also their brains are so developing and it's not about how we as adults can handle, other information coming in and they can't, blah, 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 and
Yeah.
specifically device wise. So there's a lot to unpack there, but I found that one of the things that I do with my kids specifically is I help teach them how to turn on their intuition. And
Mm.
so, because kids are so obnoxiously, I know. The amount of arguments that happen in our household is because they think they know. And
Right.
I am so also anti parenting of saying, I know, because I'm not that, because I preach it and I live it. And I'm like, but I don't know. But I'm like, how do you listen to me when I can't say I know and listen to me, because that's what like an 80s parenting would do. And I so want to say that, but I'm like, I don't even believe it. So I have zero interest in saying it.
Yeah.
But then it's just like in this constant debate, because I have a full on Capricorn sun. So it's just kind of
Yeah.
like he is so, they're old when they're young, young when they're old kind of thing. So in that mentality, all they do is want to know.
Mm.
And it's an insult. Like I always say, he was born so old of where he's insulted being a child. Like I cannot wait till he gets at least in his 20s. So then he could be like, oh, now I can relax. And it's just like, yes, please, let's all relax.
Yeah.
So what I did is, so the other day I was playing chess with them,
Mm.
and his mind and my mind work very differently. But he's super, super psychic. Like both my kids are, but he is really, because he's older, he's 10, he's, you can see it and you could feel it a lot
Mm.
differently than my daughter. And we were playing chess, and he's just like, hey, do you want to play? And I was like, okay, cool. And I didn't really know how to play chess. And I was just like, oh
Mhm.
God, I'm just going to totally mess this up. And I was like, I don't like using my brain that way because it just hurts. It hurts me like internally. And I did play chess. And then
Mhm.
all of a sudden he was like, well, no, if you do this. And I'm like, well, can you like be a teacher in chess, not just try to win? And he's like, okay. So he's like, well, if you do this, and he's taking off things, and it was like a chess mind. Like it's a
Mm.
Math brain. That's how his
Mhm.
brain works. And I'm like, you just lost me at one move. Like, I'm like, what? I need cue cards. Like, I don't know how to do this.
Yeah.
And I was like, wait, Vanessa, instead of like stopping this and saying, oh, well, I don't know how to do this, can I do it intuitively? And so what I did, it was very fascinating. I was able to play chess intuitively and know the times that I was supposed to win and the times that I wasn't.
Mm.
And I had like no opinion about it. I just let it go. And then I was like, oh, just move there. I was like, why should I move there? I'm not thinking, I don't know. And I'm like, just move there. And I did. And he's like, oh my God, that was so good. He's like, I
Mm.
could have beat you doing this. Da, 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 da. And then another time I moved somewhere else and I don't know why I'm moving this way, but he's just like, ha, 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 I got it. And I got to see him use
Mm.
his brain of how he works.
Yeah.
And that's still intuitively,
Yeah.
even though he's logically doing it. But he is playing the game, the game of life with me energetically, because I'm bringing up that consciousness of being, it's not a winning game. It's like he gets to be teacher, he gets to be also the person playing against me. He got to
Hmm.
be all different parts of it. And so when we use our intuition and we the anxiety of not knowing, I feel like that's the overall of this whole conversation. It's the fear of not knowing, that brings the anxiety. And it's just like, what if we did more practices of not knowing? So having devices, having the intel and all this information coming to you, it's because we're so obsessed with knowing. We're addicted to knowing. We just want more and more, because as soon as we get one thing, we want more of it. You know what I'm saying? When people
Yeah.
ask questions, like if you're playing a game and they're like, oh, let me just get on my phone and ask. I'm like, don't do that. Go back to when we didn't know, when we just sat a game and we're like, well, we don't know how to know. What do? We make up new rules, or we do it a different way.
Mm,
I think we get
yeah.
creative. And so it's just like, I think if we were, the way to lower that anxiety is to start kind of going more basic, and
Mm,
back to, and the parents and the elders of, meaning our generation, we're the elders now, in being able to give kids, it just instead of taking away things, introduce a place of not knowing. And
mm,
that starts with adults. And so we have to practice that and feel comfortable in that, so then we can offer that.
I like
That's
that.
just my 2 cents.
I
Yeah.
like it.
So the last one that we're just going to talk about, and then we'll wrap up, is how can we normalize these socially labeled feelings besides breaking free of them? So are we better because of it? So how can we normalize these socially labeled feelings? So it's like
Are we
whenever
talking about
people say like,
anxiety specifically, or?
yeah, just
Okay.
kind of like anxiety, like how people are always like, oh, like either, oh, I have anxiety, like it's just like a brand now,
Yep.
or it's like, especially men being like, oh, well, I don't have anxiety. No, I don't need to see anybody, or da da da. You know what I'm saying? So kind of
Yeah.
like, how can we normalize it instead of, because I think it always has been. It's not like something new. We're just kind of awakening and giving it maybe a name. And you gotta, what, to feel it to heal it kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like that. That would probably be my 2 cents on that, of
Mm,
normalizing it. That kind of like motto of, you gotta feel it to heal it, and just, and to appreciate it. I
yeah.
think that's the other thing, is like, to normalize it, that it's not something wrong with you, that
Right.
it's actually something progressive of you, and that you are growing from this. And when you are aware of something, of anxiety or whatever that is, you can be able to be better because of it. And you're showing that you're vulnerable enough to be able to use it and use the energy of it, instead of it being a victim of it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. I know. I mean, being raised a guy by a
Mhm.
wonderfully sensitive man. Um, but I'm still got all the messaging about what it means to be tough, to be strong, to be a man in this society. I think
Yeah.
I think it's. I mean, I've worked in all male environments where feelings outside of grumpiness and anger and whatever it was like, it was limited, right? And I think depending on who the person is, like myself, for example, like I'm obviously here talking to you and whoever's watching, hello, about my feelings and what I've experienced. And I find that particularly with guys, I have a social circle of guys where I can emote, but it's like also talking like matter of factly about something. It's like sometimes I don't drink water and I get a headache. Sometimes I bump into something in my life and it makes me feel anxious. Same, two things that are both just natural. One
Mhm.
is more stigmatized than the other. And I think finding people you feel comfortable talking. I mean, not unloading your one. Like if you're in a place of distress in the moment, it's going to be hard to have a conversation that is uncharged. So
Mhm.
I think finding people that you trust that you can talk to, talking to younger generations, just asking questions, like kind of like you were talking about with devices and asking questions. Like, I'm not going to tell you what this means, but like, what does this mean to you? Okay,
Mhm.
that's interesting. Ask another question. Oh, I've found, and this is what I've heard, or yeah, a lot of people think that, and like actually, blah blah blah. So I think the same thing is just like intergenerationally, we can start normalizing anxiety, or just, I think a lot of people, like you said, it is a brand, but like I think some people, I've met, it's also like I have this, and I now I've recognized it. I'm not going to do anything about it. So I think it's also just like talking about our journey of like what we do and like how what we bring to the table, and understanding kind of what every person needs. So um, yeah, I think just instead of just getting past it, realizing it's normal, and by normalizing it, we can understand when people are struggling with it, as opposed to dealing with it or navigating it, and working their way through it. And the community of the families that we choose, our own families. Um, that's where I usually go first. Is I have like concentric circles of people where I have my core handful of people that I can talk to about anything, and they can talk anything about me. And so when we're feeling a little messy, I can go there first, and then from there, when I'm feeling a little bit more put together, and then I have different conversations out from there. So yeah, I think mental health is something that we talk about more as a society. I remember once in an airport when I was 19, 20 years old, and it had five different men's faces. Like, this is also the face of mental health or something. It's like it's okay to see a counselor, and it felt revolutionary to see like, whoa, we're talking about men and mental health. Like, this is what anxiety looks like or something. I think, and I now feel like people talk about it, which is great. Um, So I think that's a great place. No, people are no longer in the shadows, right? So we can talk about it. And then, as for myself, finding a community, close knit community where people are finding solutions. We can share these ideas and bounce them off, and being like, "Well, how?" Ask. It's a safe place to ask questions. And so, I think, at least for me, that's been kind of a helpful part of the journey, is not going it alone. Um, and um, and yeah, so I think I'm just gonna start repeating myself. I think, yeah, that's my final answer.
Yeah, I love that. And how I think of it also is that when I'm in a room and I'm feeling, let's say I'm feeling anxious about something or whatever,
Mhm.
I also think there's probably around 10 other people in this room that are feeling exactly how I feel.
Yeah, yeah,
Like statistically, like
yeah,
that's just really logically. And I think that if we start talking about it and sharing ourselves instead of that small talk of like, yeah,
yeah,
I'm good. Like I rarely answer unless I'm like really fantastically good.
yeah,
And then I'll elaborate on that.
yeah,
But I will always give a response of I feel a little bit nutty right now, or whatever, just whatever is real, and we
right,
start responding maybe more authentically, because I think that any type of hiccups that we have with anxiety or any type of mental challenge,
mhm,
is that we don't want to have it because it makes us less.
right,
And if we could see it more as our superpower, that it
yeah,
actually makes us
yeah,
more available and open,
yeah,
and then everybody else has that availability and openness because we are showing up, honoring that
yeah,
and using it, not to like be a victim of, but to actually use it for its arrival.
yeah,
I think that would be really helpful for all of our society, and for society to really
yeah.
be
I
able
love
to
what you
be.
said. I really love what you said about just when you were able to interact with someone authentically, you give permission for them to act authentically, and then
Yeah.
good things happen. You know, when you
Yeah.
create a circle of trust like that. And
Like
that's what
us, you know?
absolutely,
Like
absolutely.
I didn't really know you, you know, and I think that's the beauty of this story. Like I didn't know, like you were my childhood friend, but I didn't really know you.
Yeah, no,
So
no,
it's
that's
just kind
true.
of like, and then you out, yeah, in a very
Yeah,
vulnerable way, and that's how this magic happens, you
yeah,
know. And it's just like this wouldn't have happened, you know, without that being able to show. I mean, we're not talking about like, hey, do you remember, you know, what you had for lunch? You know what I'm
yeah,
saying? Like we
yeah,
talked about deep stuff
yeah,
right off the bat. And
yeah.
so
And
really magical stuff happens from
it
that.
does. And I think I love in those quality conversations like we're having now, like we had a couple days ago. I never leave those conversations, or even like a good friend, like a friend from high school. I went to a boarding school as well, and I hadn't seen him in 19 years. His I met his child who's
Wow.
18, and we picked up right where we left off. We always had great conversations. I love the way
Mhm.
his brain works, and I never leave a conversation with him or with you or like there's a handful of people without learning something about myself or with like a some epiphany. I'm like, that is it's like, oh, I like, and not just like one little part, but like a through line that runs through my experiences and their shared experiences. And that's, I feel so cool. I love it. So, that's
Me
why we do
too.
this. Yeah.
That's why I have so many notes. I'm like, oh, that's really good.
Yeah, that's it, and
Like I'm
that's it.
totally gonna figure that out and use that in my life, you know, of like being able to use that.
Yeah,
Yeah, because
absolutely.
I think that we all everybody we ping pong off of each other, but we have to be willing to show up.
Yeah,
So no more small talk. Get deep,
yeah,
get open, and share
yeah,
ourselves. Really
yeah,
share ourselves. Yeah.
yeah,
All
absolutely.
right. Thank you so much for this. And thank you, all the listeners. I am so grateful that people even showed up on this. And
Yeah,
also, thank you so much to all who commented. I loved these questions. They were really insightful and give us something to talk about too. So thank you so much. And I'll connect. And if you would like more of connections from my guest, EO, and then doing the psychic podcast, please anything that you'd be interested in have us talking about, please comment below in the after the live chat once it comes back as a replay, and you could comment there or else just message me either way, and then we'd be happy to put that on the schedule. All right, thank you so much, EO. Such a
absolutely.
pleasure. All right,
Take care.
bye.